What's going on, guys? Sensible Prepper Live, Prepper School Volume 3470. We are on it. Great, you guys hanging out with us today. We're going to be talking about some fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, we got Robbie Wheaton with us from Wheaton Arms. Also, the Robbie Wheaton YouTube channel. Check it out. Link down below in the description. Robbie's been a gunsmith for over 20 years. And he has Wheaton Arms, which does incredible Glock aftermarket parts. The best flat face trigger on the market, period. Awesome stuff.
But, and I tell you, we finally started carrying the magazine rebuild kits for the Springfield Prodigies as well. Because we did that video on it on the Prodigy magazine fix, and we had a ton of people asking us where they could get the parts. I can't find the parts. I can't figure out which parts I need.
I think you got a text from me on that.
I did. So we decided to just start stocking those.
Good.
And make it easier for everyone to find it.
So if you got a Prodigy or you're using those type magazines.
Yep, the
Duramax. Okay. Good stuff. Now, we're going to be talking about something today that's a little bit, I guess a few years ago it was really out there.
Yeah.
And we've lived in relative peace. After the Cold War kind of stopped, the wall came down. And for a number of years, we've just been kind of just cruising. Very
really,
peaceful.
As far as like world peace, for probably the last 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff in the Middle East is what it was.
Yep.
But, it wasn't really that much of a threat to us. I mean, there were some threats a little bit here and there, but we've really lived in peace. And because of that, we've become very kind of docile until just recently.
Yep.
I think COVID-19 really woke a lot of people up. And then now we're facing a lot of things on the global scale. One thing I do want to mention is our sponsor, Exotac, which they make the best fire starters out of the market. There's a link down below in the description. Use Sootch 20 and get 20% off. All made in the USA, which is a good thing. Now, let's talk about World War III. Is it possible? Is it possible to avoid it? It may be maybe even the most important thing. There's a lot of think tanks, and they've run all these war scenarios on what's going on. So what do we got going on in the world right now?
Man, you've got the war with Russia, Ukraine, and U.S. supporting Ukraine. Russia's being supported by China and several other countries, Iran. That's a huge hot button right there. Then we've got the issues with China that we have right now. North Korea, which has been ongoing for probably the most serious nuclear threat, in the last 20 plus years has been North Korea, where we've been, pretty peaceable with Russia and with China. And but North Korea has always been kind of a sparking point that could go off.
Right. And we have a history with them considering the Korean War.
That's
so
right.
we support South Korea, which makes them even more angry. And they're kind of they're kind of out there.
They are.
One thing about China that really is kind of a unique thing is that we have a symbiotic kind of relationship with China.
We really do. And, in that regard, I think a nuclear war with China would not only hurt our economy, but it would devastate their economy as well.
Right.
Because, a lot of their exports, a lot of their goods that they send out go to the United States. A lot of their trade is with the United States. A lot of their resources for raw materials and scrap materials that they smelt down and reproduce goods with come from the United States.
Well, and then we saw during COVID, a lot of our medical, our antibiotics, a lot of things that we really depend on, and it caused a massive shortage in supplies.
That's right.
And then too, with Ukraine, we've got a massive shortage of supplies. With agriculture, we're seeing food go up. We're seeing fuel prices go up.
But, Ukraine is one of the top 10 producers of wheat in the world.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize that. They
and sunflowers.
Yeah. Well, for all y'all that chew on sunflowers, you're good. But yeah, the wheat, that's a huge food product.
Yeah, and another thing I think we've been doing is not just supporting them financially, but with arms, with M1 Abrams, with missile systems. And so it's making us, in fact, Putin even said it, that the U.S., this is World War III. It's already started. It's just localized right now. because they're looking at us. The thing is, there are some long-range missiles that have been placed in Ukraine that are U.S.
Yep.
That if they're used against the interior of Russia, which, Ukraine's defending themselves, Putin said that would be a direct responsibility of the U.S. That would be like the U.S. attacking them because we gave them the arms.
And Putin has moved long-range missiles into Belarus now.
Yeah.
So you've got Russian long-range missiles in Belarus that could presumably reach the United States as well.
Well, and Europe is threatened.
Yep.
And the thing is, guys, we've got China on one side, we've got Russia on the other, we've got Iran, which is very much an enemy of the U.S. They hate the U.S. You've got North Korea, which kind of counterparts Iran, kind of a weird dichotomy. And then you have all the other Middle Eastern nations that just hate the U.S. We've been involved over there so much. And so you have a lot of animosity. I think one of the big things that can spark any kind of situation is not rational thought, but emotional. One of the things about Taiwan is that they produce more semiconductors than anybody in the world. We depend on those semiconductors to get, and chips, computer chips, microchips. They produce so many that we depend on. And that's one reason why that we're going to most likely defend Taiwan against an invasion, which, guys, it always goes down to the money. It always does. I mean, there's something about one thing about Ukraine is if they take over the Crimea and then they take that port, and for some reason my brain's gone. If they take that port, that is Russia's main influence in the Black Sea. And so they can't risk that. They will not risk that. And with a lot of the saber rattling, we'll just use nuclear weapons as a possibility. It's a very scary time on the world stage. And the one thing too is, and I read this in it was one of these think tanks where they're working out scenarios, is that right after World War II, America saw the devastation. The world saw the devastation. We didn't want to return to that. Now we've forgotten the devastation.
That's right.
It's not as important. So a lot of times we're like, yeah, we need to send stuff to Ukraine. Yeah, we got to help Taiwan. Yeah, we got to do this. Yeah, America's going to do this. In a time where our military is the lowest it's been morale-wise and recruit-wise for generations. I mean, it's just decimated, and it's becoming more and more. So while we have a volunteer army, and this is one thing to think about as far as pushing for different domination in certain areas, is that you could see your children or you sent to those areas to fight a war that hopefully we can avoid.
I think you're exactly right in that regard. Right now with our military being drawn down, not because the military wants it drawn down, but because people just don't agree with or don't want to be in the military. I think in a lot of cases the military has alienated their customer base,
their core.
That's right.
Yeah,
they've alienated a lot of their customer base with this wokeism. And a lot of people that would have historically went in the military are foregoing that and going into other fields now because of the wokeism within the military. They don't want anything to do with it.
Right.
And one of the things I think that we could very well end up seeing is the return of the draft for people so they can start bringing people into the military, getting their numbers back up to where they need to be. Because right now, the last couple of years, our military has not been able to meet its numbers.
Well, COVID-19, the requirements for vaccination, they lost a lot of important people. And then they turned right around and started this program, which really the military should just stay out of that. No matter what side you're on, the military should stay out of that kind of stuff because it just causes a lot of division.
They in the Marine Corps, they just did away with at Parris Island, their 4th Battalion, which is where they train all the female recruits. They just did away with that. And all of the Marine Corps now is co-ed training. So men and women training together in the same battalions and everything at Parris Island. And they're integrating that into Camp Pendleton in California as well.
Right.
Which is very interesting to me because historically, all females in the Marine Corps trained at Parris Island in the 4th Battalion. And as of just a few weeks ago, they did away with that, and they're doing everything co-ed now, which I see there being a lot of issues.
All right. Well, being a Marine yourself, it definitely, there's just a lot of things that we're seeing. So on the world stage, it's prime. It's not inevitable. It's not inevitable. I think if we can get some leadership really behind things and get things turned around, we can go back to a more reasonable type diplomacy.
Possibly. But, there's a lot to have to turn around.
Well, I'll tell you, I know some people in China. And one of the things that in fact, I was talking to Toby over at WWIII, and who lived in Wuhan when all that happened. Right. But one of the things the Chinese people are very against any interference with Taiwan. I mean, they are very much against it. Yeah. And then the same thing you've got with Russia now. You've got some conflict where there's some people that are really for it and there's some people that are against it. So it's a little bit different. But the fact is when you get emotional on something, it turns into craziness. Now, let's talk about what a war. Let's talk about some of the effects first. We're going to talk about the effects, and then we're going to go into some things that we think or recommend that you do. And two, Sarah Mack's over there taking questions. If you have some questions, you can go ahead and give them to her. And when we take a break, we'll get to some questions. Okay, so the economy, that's a big hit. I mean, the economy, whether the U.S. ever suffers any physical warfare on our shores, the economy is going to be just hammered.
Yeah. Well, and we see the economy, trickling down right now, moving toward a recession or depression, depending on how far it ends up going. So we're already starting to see signs of that. And, I guess there's two ways you can look at that. World War II, the war actually brought us out of the depression. Maybe World War III pushes us deeper into one.
Well, we don't have the industrial might that we had before. We're too dependent on other nations. Yep. And that's a big negative.
It is.
Because
absolutely.
You're going to have a lot of people that are just going to be out of jobs. And two, supplies, things like that produce goods. It could be like the lids on a bottle could be out. You could have a bottle, you could have a product, but just like with COVID.
Simple things like lead for projectiles. We've closed down all of our lead mines in the United States. Our last one closed down about 7 years ago or so. We produce no new lead in the United States anymore from any of our mines. They're all gone.
Wow.
And a lot of people don't realize that. All of our lead that we use now is recycled or imported. So, just having enough lead to be able to make projectiles is a huge thing.
Or batteries.
That's right. Absolutely.
Batteries, so, it can affect us in so many different ways. Okay, now then we have our military, and we kind of talked about that. The draft could be coming back. We saw a lot of the action. Now, one thing that I heard, and this was in one of the war scenarios, is that China's plan is that in the first 30 hours to just unleash just crazy destruction in any kind of war situation, which aircraft carriers are very vulnerable, islands, different air bases, things like that. So the first 30 hours of a war could possibly be the most important time, once it's announced to go, okay. I mean, the one thing about World War II was when we declared war on Japan after they bombed Pearl Harbor, it was a while before things started happening.
It was because we didn't have the troops or the manpower or the equipment to be able to jump straight into a war. So It took us months to ramp up to get to the point to where we could actually enter the war and be successful.
Right. And then, the U.S. has held military superiority for a long time, but we are quickly losing it to China mainly. Russia, their nuclear stockpile is beyond belief. And that's the one thing. There have been some threats. But with China, their capabilities have really risen over the past few years.
They have. But one thing with Russia, a lot of Russia's troops are in Ukraine right now fighting. And Russia has lost an untold number of troops fighting this war in Ukraine. I mean, they're sending people over there that don't want to fight. They're sending people over there that are, just against the war. And they're like, here's your rifle. You're going to fight. So, we don't know how many people that they've held in reserve that they're not sending there. But if you look at it as a whole, they have sent a large number of soldiers to the Ukraine to fight, which would handicap them or hinder them significantly fighting a world stage war.
But I think that may actually increase the risk of a nuclear conflict.
It could,
Because
because they are so low on troops.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, there's a lot of balances there.
Yep.
What about invasion? Now, that's one thing we've never had to face. I mean, I think the Aleutian Islands off of Alaska one time were invaded by the Japs.
Yeah.
But it was just a few islands. But the soil of the U.S. has never been invaded since, pretty much, the beginning of our country.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would that look like? I mean, Red Dawn, the movie. But, with the might of Russia and China, the capability of transportation that is far greater than it was.
The United States would be a difficult country to invade.
Yeah,
just because there's no easy way to get here without, you try and send a bunch of planes, they're going to be picked up on radar. You try and send a bunch of ships, they're going to be picked up on radar. There's no easy way to invade the United States other than through our southern border.
Which is under invasion right now.
And I'm saying that in all reality, there's hundreds of thousands of people pouring across our southern border. If those are fighting age males that are coming across the southern border, that are coming into our country either to fight a guerrilla war or coming into our country to form an army and to fight as a unit, as an army unit, our border is basically wide open right now. So anyone that wants to come across can get across.
Well, and two, I know China has really warmed up to Mexico
Mm-hmm.
and to other places in South America, which would be more of a staging area to attack the U.S.
Absolutely.
So, which it's just not out of the realm of possibility. It's definitely there.
If I was looking at, a long-term war and planning on attacking the United States, that's exactly what I would do. I would, become very cozy with my neighbors in the South and start setting up bases, supporting their economy, pouring money into their economy. So their economy is propped up. Start building military bases on their shore, bringing troops over to staff those military bases, and eventually invade the United States.
Right. And it could be done, especially if there's an attack on the military, our defenses.
That's
right. There's a heavy attacks on our defenses, which could be done in a number of ways. EMP is a possibility, which to me would be the worst case scenario, other than just a direct nuclear strike. Mm-hmm. An EMP, and we've talked about EMPs a number of times. That's a possibility anyway. One thing I have here is I have a little Faraday sleeve. And this protects your phone, protects different things. There's a lot of stuff on Amazon to do that. But what it would do to the economy, what it would do to our infrastructure, it would destroy it.
The infrastructure is a huge concern because everything in our country runs on computers. Our power, our water,
our cars,
our traffic lights, everything runs off computers, computer chips. When you wipe out all of those computer chips, all of a sudden you lose your ability to provide water to people. You lose your ability to provide power to people. You lose your transportation ability, and then you lose your food.
Well, we saw that when they had the gas, that one pipeline, that the computers were hacked.
When the hackers got it.
And it was crazy. It was crazy. And that was a small scale, and we were still able to get fuel from other places.
Right.
So EMP, medical services, all that kind of stuff. Our financial services gone in a second. So EMP, nuclear war, obviously. And, one of the things about nuclear war is, it's according to where you are. It's location.
Yep.
And if you live in an area that, could be a target for nuclear war, ground zero is pretty much, it could be unsurvivable. But the fallout that happens around that, we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But nuclear war is definitely something that from the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, there was a massive program. In fact, this is from the civil defense era, and it's a Geiger counter. And during the Clinton years, of course, this was after Reagan. It was after the threat went away. I'm not going to blast him for just that. But, they stopped the civilian system to be able to, protect us from nuclear war and nuclear fallout. And so the great thing is now there's a lot of options. We'll take a look at those in a minute. But radiation is a big thing. And the destruction, the absolute destruction of certain areas. And one of the things, though, I want to mention before we get into radiation, because we will talk about it, is, guys, it's survivable. You just need to know a few things, and we're going to give you some tips about what to do. We've actually done a whole video on that already, but it just needs to be reiterated. Sickness, plagues, without medical help, without hygiene,
Hygiene's going to be a big one. You lose your running water, you lose your toilets to be able to flush your waste. And then all of a sudden, where's your waste going? Are they going in a bucket and you're dumping it in the yard? Or you digging? I'm being serious.
Yeah.
Are you digging a hole? You making a latrine? Are you digging a outhouse for all of your waste to go into? Waste disposal, especially in your big cities, where they don't have a way or a place to be able to dispose of their waste. You're going to see a lot of people sick. You're going to see, we've pretty much eradicated cholera in the United States. You see a case of it every now and then from vegetables and stuff, especially like lettuce that doesn't get cleaned well, or has feces on it that ends up causing cholera. You see a case or two of it a year. Cholera is going to become rampant.
Right. That's right.
And that's one of the biggest ones that, as far as disease and sickness and plagues that would concern me, cholera would probably be up toward the top of the list.
Well, and two, with all the people crossing the border, they're bringing a lot of stuff. Tuberculosis is higher.
That's right.
Whooping cough, all those old type things that we pretty much eradicated years ago. Smallpox, all the fun things. And then two, the vaccines and things like that will not be available as much. So sickness, plague, trash, just your trash. It has a lot of things in it. They bring rodents, bring insects. I mean, this is just such a positive. We're just having a fun time.
You talk about that with trash. Most everyone has some sort of trash pickup where someone comes by once a week, gathers up the garbage, takes it to the landfill, disposes of it. And you figure you generate about a bag of trash per person per week. So a 4-person household, you're generating 4, maybe 5 bags of trash a week. And, over a month, you're looking at 20, 25 bags of garbage. That's, food waste, all kinds of trash. I mean, you name it, you're going to have it in there. Where's that going to go?
Right.
Or, we're going to go back to where we were 100 years ago, where people are 50 years ago, where a lot of people are burning their trash.
Well, you'd have to or bury it.
That's
right. It's one or the other. And it's funny. We're getting ready to do a video on not waste, because I did one on waste disposal and trash disposal about a month ago. But how to recycle what you bring in.
Right.
And guys, to minimize your trash. We do the recycling thing. We put our cans in our bottles, but how to actually recycle to where you're not taking it to the recycler, you're recycling it for yourself. And there are some things too. We won't be getting as many Amazon packages.
I was just going to say that a lot of the things that we currently have that comes in boxes and packages or cans or whatever that we just open up, take it out, throw it away. We're not going to have that.
Right.
So your trash is going to be minimized. You still will have some from your canned goods, and most of your waste is going to be food waste at that point. Right. It's not going to be packaging material that comes in,
which is probably the one that will attract the most
rodents
and pests and things. Okay, and then last, and then we're going to stop here, and we're going to get to some questions right after we finish this one, because then we're going to talk about some solutions. But warlords and looters. In certain areas, when authority starts to wane, when things are kind of crazy, you will have people that could rise up if it's a vacuum.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully which is crazy to say it, but hopefully the federal government will stay intact and be able to govern.
Listen, we've already seen that on a small scale over the last few years with looters, looting, protest, destroying areas. We've seen that on a small scale already over the last few years, and a lot of times nothing was done about it.
Right.
And then we've seen times where, people were hammered for it pretty hard.
All right.
Just really kind of depending on where they were and what they were doing at the time.
Right.
So, that I think that is definitely something that would be a huge, huge concern. And maybe a positive as well. Most people look at, warlords and looting and stuff as a negative, but, kind of look at it from a positive perspective. That's going to be people that are banding together to support one another, protect one another, and to protect their areas where they live.
It's according to the motive of whoever's leading the charge.
That's right.
And, it could. Leaders could rise up. They want to do good, want to help and protect. So, yeah, that could be definitely
could be good and bad.
Could
That's
be.
right.
Could be. Okay, let's go to a few questions, and then we're going to get into some solutions, some things we think that we want to give you some tips and hints about.
King Tut 574 asks, starting with a low budget, is it better to have less ammunition of higher quality or more low quality cheap ammunition?
Personally, I think that quantity versus quality. The U.S. military, they use full metal jacket. Now, it's not as effective. And of course, with rifle ammunition, it's not as important for self-defense. But I think full metal jacket, personally, I'm heavy on full metal jacket because it's a heck of a lot cheaper. But I do have quite a bit of self-defense ammunition. This is the one thing, whether it's handgun or rifle, and I'm going to let Robbie touch on this one too, but with handgun ammunition, I like to have a little more self-defense ammunition. And then I have my standard stuff just to have more quantity. But for rifle, unless I'm hunting with it, and really you don't need as much. For your handgun, you're not going to need as much ammunition as you will for a rifle. Because this is more of a personal defense. Rifle is more of a defense. So what do you think, Robbie?
Yeah, I agree with you on most of that. The rifle ammunition, full metal jacket, buy your bulk stuff, 1,000 round boxes, whatever, and store that up. Unless you're buying ammunition for a precision rifle for long range shooting, you really don't need any type of high quality precision ammunition. Your bulk stuff is going to be fine for what you need. On the handgun ammunition, I like defensive ammunition. But the reason that I like defensive ammunition is because it minimizes overpenetration. In a World War III situation, you're not really concerned about overpenetration. And so that's where I look at handgun ammunition, where ball ammunition is going to be just as effective because you're not worried about, in most cases, what's going to be beyond your target, what's going to be beyond your threat. So for me, I would stock up on full metal jacket, bulk ammunition for my handgun and for my rifle, because if we're in that type of situation, you're not worried about overpenetration or anything.
I think the one thing about handgun ammunition, though, is the energy that it retains in the body. And so to me, a 22 will kill you, but a 9mm that's a 147 grain jacketed hollow point is going to open up and kill you faster or stop you faster. And so that to me, with doing gel tests and stuff, that's the one thing. But I would not shy away from. I wouldn't have just a limited supply of self-defense ammunition and forego a nice amount of full metal jacket or training ammunition. Plus, it can be used for barter.
The Parallel Sound asks question. They say our U.S. highway is for military to travel between states during times of war. My question is, during SHTF, wouldn't it be smart to avoid them? They come recommended in some videos.
Well, this is my thing with and it's true that our highway system was built for the military. It was built to transport troops and machinery. The one thing about getting on the freeways to me is that you're going to have a lockdown. We have lockdowns where we live. There's a major freeway that goes up where we live, and there's lockdowns about every day. Yeah. You put an SHTF situation or a World War III situation where like Atlanta's being bombed, you're going to have this massive amount of refugees coming up. They're going to run out of gas. They're going to break down on the road. And people get heated. We did a video one time where we were in a car coming back from an NRA convention or meeting. And it was in Kentucky, and all of a sudden traffic just stopped dead. It was in the middle of nowhere and traffic stopped dead. And we sat there for like 2 hours, and we made a video and didn't, of course, use the whole 2 hours, but we made a video about how people were getting angry and driving like maniacs because they were angry and doing things. And what if we broke down there? What would happen? We were miles from anybody. So a bug out situation has to really be kind of thought out and have alternate routes and have a map. But yeah, I personally would avoid freeways because of that. What do you think?
I agree with you. And not only because of the gridlock situation that you could run into, but if you've got troops and transport vehicles using those interstates, they're probably going to be blocked off anyway to prevent personal automobiles from getting on those freeways to allow the military to be able to get to where they're going quickly. So yeah, I would in a World War invasion type situation, I would absolutely avoid any of the interstates. Stick to your secondary roads, and
which would be clogged,
right
too.
Right.
Yeah. So, which we're getting ready to do a video on how to live in your car, and there may be some real good pointers in there. Okay, Sarah Mac.
Chris Matthews asked, hey, Sarah Mac, can you ask Mr. Don and Robbie about how often to change a gas tube on an AR? Also, mid-length or carbon gas, pluses and minuses.
So mid-length is going to give you a little softer recoil impulse. Carbon length is going to give you a little harder recoil impulse. Both of them work fine. I personally prefer mid-length just because of that softer recoil impulse. As far as a PM schedule for it, mine is about every 3,000 rounds that I change out my gas tube. Now, I don't throw them away when I change them. I'll save those old gas tubes, especially if they're not worn really bad. And that way I've got some put back in case I need to swap out and can't get a replacement. But around every 3,000 rounds is my replacement schedule for mine.
Now, one thing that I want to add to that is with mid-length gas systems, you have less violence coming back on your system. Right. So you're going to get a little bit longer run time. You can probably have a little less gas. So that's just one thing I'd add.
It's easier on your bolt. It's easier on your bolt carrier group. It's easier on the gas rings. And with the gas tube, what you're looking for is the little flared head that seals up on the gas key. You want to make sure that the flare is still there. What will happen is eventually the rifle will wear the flare off of that head, and that's where you start running into leakage issues where it doesn't seal up and you start getting jams and failure to feeds and extracts and stuff.
All right, let's go to one more.
Robin Hamilton asked, what is the likelihood of a nuclear bomb making it into the interior of the U.S.?
Well, I would personally say low in a sense, but it's according to the scenario. If we have defenses that have been hit earlier, we may not be able to stop it. And it's according to the volume of number of nuclear warheads. The one thing about China and Russia is that they have been continuing to build up their stockpile way beyond what the U.S. has done. Unfortunately, the U.S. typically, goes by their word. They'll make a peace agreement or some kind of, pact, and they'll stick to it. And the Russians and the Chinese will not. And so, it's just one of those things. And I think Putin just said he wasn't going to be part of the START treaty anyway that they signed a few years ago. He kind of threw that off when we started having this conflict.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I look at is not necessarily ICBMs, which is what most people initially think of when they think of the United States being attacked. I worry more about nuclear weapons from submarines. Submarines, they can pull right up, within a mile or two ashore and send missiles into your interior. And then you have to look at where you live. I mean, it's going to be based, a nuclear attack is going to be based on a few different things. It's going to be based on large population areas. It's going to be based on military installations and our nuclear defense system. Those are going to be the three areas that are going to be the predominant areas to be hit. Your large metropolitan areas, which are also going to include a lot of your banking. It's going to include a lot of your government. Those are probably going to be your primary targets. Your secondary targets are going to be your military installations, and then your nuclear weapons systems are going to be your tertiary target.
And probably nuclear power stations will be like on down the line, but
right.
It could be possible.
Exactly.
And then too, if they're not able to get the things they need to keep them running, that could turn into a problem.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the one thing about it is to know how to survive through it. And two, if you do live in those areas and things start to heat up, is to maybe take a week and go down to visit your sister in Kansas or something, I mean.
Right. Somewhere that is a lower threat area.
Yeah. So, it's just really watching, because like China, their thing is the first 30 hours they're going to unleash. Yeah. So probably the best thing to do is to, when things start to ramp up, is to go ahead and have a plan and kind of be ready to go at a moment's notice. And then, put that together.
Well, one of the big things a lot of people don't consider is, the Gulf Stream and how it moves things across our country. You need to be upwind of any potential nuclear attack. So like if you think that California is going to be attacked, 100 or 200 miles, 300 miles to the east of California could still suffer effects from nuclear radiation, nuclear fallout, because of the Gulf Stream bringing that radiation across the country.
Right. So go north.
Yep. I mean, really, north is probably going to be your safest bet.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to our list, because this is, to me, one of the most important things. I think a lot of us do kind of understand, that there's a potential. And that's the thing, guys. We're not saying this is inevitable. We're not saying that it's going to happen tomorrow, but we are saying that it's something that the risk have grown considerably. So let's consider it. First off, of course, is your basic preps. Now, because a lot of you guys watch the channel, a lot of you have already done these, you know these. But for those who may see this title and just jump in and go, hey, I'm concerned.
They're coming for us.
Yeah, we got a helicopter landing on the roof. We don't want you talking about that. I think they probably want us to talk about it.
I feel like I'm Mr. Guns in gear right now.
Okay, so the first thing is your basic preps. Food production in a war situation is going to get really dicey. A lot of the things that they need to have food production and the fuels and everything else that they need to run the equipment, the fertilizers, all that stuff. This is going to be, the supply chains are going to be really thin.
Even getting seed.
Yeah, getting the basics.
Yeah.
And really, having food put back. Guys, I've been saying this for years, and this is one thing that we could face. There are other threats out there. And so having your food put aside, starting a garden, it's just prime time right now. Having your gardens going, producing some food. And then, of course, one thing that I'm big about is canned food, because it's easy. Now, we do have My Patriot Supply. We have other food that we have put back and we have it stored. But we also like those conveniences. Like when COVID hit, we didn't get into My Patriot Supply food or what was we went to a pantry and with the Mormons. We went to one of their warehouses and got a bunch of food, about a year's supply.
Mormon cannery.
Thank you. I was having a brain block. But went to the Mormon cannery. We stocked up on a year's supply of food. Then we've done that. And I'm not saying you have to have it. That's a lot of food, a lot of money. You may not have the space. But the one thing is to start putting together something. Put together something, and you can start small. Go to the grocery, buy a couple of cans here and there. Water is going to be huge. You can only live 3 days without water, and so you've got to have water. Find out your water source. One thing about it, you may say, well, I got a well. Well, is your well hooked up to an electrical power? Is it, how is the water generated? Do you have a way to get that water out?
Right. You bucket bailing water. Do you have a hand pump to be able to get water out if you don't have electricity for the pump to work?
Is the well 300 feet deep?
Right. Right. What type of well do you have? Is it a drilled well? Is it a dug well? Those are all things to consider.
And then you've got just water sources, creeks, streams, and ponds. And guys, it is a gamble to drink that water. It can make you sick or even kill you. And so, number one, not easy, but probably the one thing without a lot of preparation is boiling water. Boiling it, drinking it, it doesn't lose the sediment. It typically doesn't lose the smell, but it makes it much safer. Using bleach in water. My favorite is we have the Berkey filtration systems. We use it on an everyday basis, but having some way to filter the water, to treat the water. And then you have shelter. Well, if your house is bombed or, there's destruction, got to have ways to be able to shelter yourself.
I mean, that's one that I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's not going to happen to me. How many people in Ukraine right now thought that wouldn't happen to them and stayed at home and are dead now because of it? These entire cities just completely wiped
destroyed.
out.
Yeah,
just
it's
rubble,
horrible.
Nothing but rubble.
And so, having some thought about what you're going to do as far as having some kind of shelter. And then medical. Of course, medical's a big one. I would highly recommend medical training, stop the bleed, or trauma classes. And those are great. Honestly, you don't have to have a black magic to know these medical things. And we talked about that. Okay. We're going to move on. Let's go. Strength in numbers. You need to have a posse.
One is known, two is one.
That's right. You need to have people that you can count on. For us, we have a prepper group, and we're very close. We're very tight, and we've developed these relationships, and it's a beautiful thing because now we're all family. But when you're looking for those, that was one of the things, and I've got to mention for FOUL, the Modern Survival Guide to the Coming Economic Collapse about Argentina back in 2001, I believe it was, or 2010 maybe. But anyway, that book is where they had an economic collapse and the things that happened. And one of the things he said was, you're not going to make it alone. He goes, you've got to have a group. And when he said group, he said Buenos Aires, which was a very up and coming city. I mean, it was a state of the art, beautiful. I mean, the culture there was everywhere. He said the only way a lot of those people survived was to get blocks, and they joined together for security and getting things they needed. And that's how they survived, is they joined together. And two, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to join together, after the fact. But you want to make sure that you start to develop groups and develop people. People are your number one asset. Gas mask. Rob, you've had a lot of experience with gas masks.
A little bit. They work when they work, and they work well. But it's one of those things that you have to keep an eye on it. You have to check it. You have to inspect it. They have a bad habit on the sides here. They'll get splits in the sides, especially as they get old. If they've been stored for a long time, they'll crack. They'll dry rot. So you really have to keep an eye on your mask and make sure that it's in good working order. You got to store it in a good location, a dry location that doesn't get moisture and stuff to it. But you also have to be able to access it quickly if you need it.
Right. Well, this is a Mira. Mira makes some really great masks. And this has the filter that you can put on either side so you can fire a rifle. Mm-hmm. But this is not only just for a nuclear. It could be for a biological, which is another thing that we really didn't hit on. It could be biological, and then it could be for smoke. Just smoke and debris. But, for years, now I've had masks.
And lest we forget CS.
Yeah, CS gas.
You've got your eye shield and everything where your face is covered. So you're still going to be able to see if you're in the middle of a CS attack.
All right. So there are a lot of potential threats. Yeah. And guys, I've been kind of back and forth about gas masks. I've always had them, but I haven't really pushed it because I've kind of been like, but after COVID kind of brought me around, and then just with threats that are going on worldwide, I think having a really nice gas mask, Mira makes some of the best.
They do.
So I would check them out, but there's a number of ones. I would be careful to buy surplus military gas mask, which I've had in the past, because just like Robbie said, they can split, they can have problems.
That's one of the biggest things that I've seen with a lot of your surplus masks are the dry rot and the cracks. And, if the mask goes bad, it's of no use to you. If it gets a little cut in it or a little split in it, it's of no use to you.
Right.
Throw it away.
And this even came with a canteen. You can hook this up and drink water out of it. So some kind of way to protect your breathing. But gas masks to me are one thing I think I would look at. And you can get biological suits. In fact, we have a few of those as well. I didn't bring them out. But you can have those to cover your skin, especially for nuclear. And the one thing about fallout is you don't want it to get on your skin, which goes to the next thing, nuclear issues. The old Geiger counters, these can be calibrated. There's a company that actually takes these and calibrates them. But man, there are some really good options out there for Geiger counters, and they're fairly inexpensive, and you can get them on Amazon.
Now, I do have to say one thing that I like about the old style one like this is an analog radiation detector.
Right. That's
where these are digital. They've all got chips in them. So if you're looking for something that's going to work in case of an EMP, the old analog system, throw a battery in it, it's going to work. Where a lot of times your digital ones may not work anymore.
And in a nuclear detonation, an EMP usually accompanies it.
That's
so. But yes, I mean, and you can find these, but again, sometimes they don't work, sometimes they do, but you can have them tested. And one thing, well, of course, potassium iodide, these pills, they're cheap, guys. They're cheap. And you can get these. And what this does is it fills your thyroid, because radiation goes straight to your thyroid. And so this gives you a lot of protection. And you can go by the instructions that are on it. I think it's 1 pill a day at first. There's water radiation filters that you can use that'll filter out radiated water. But here, I'm going to give you a hint. This is a good one. The U.S. Armed Forces Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Survival Manual. have some stuff like this. This is not expensive stuff. I mean, the Geiger counter, this, you know, it could probably run about $100, but otherwise, a lot of this stuff is fairly reasonable. And surviving nuclear fallout is not rocket science. You can do it. Big thing is you got to get yourself indoors somewhere and get it covered. And of course, the deeper in the ground and the more cement, the better.
That's right.
But at least get out of that area. So we've done a video about some of this stuff, but guys, study up on it, learn. And there's a lot of great YouTube videos out there.
There's a lot of great YouTube videos out there. And even the federal government's website has a lot on nuclear weapons and what to do in case of a nuclear attack. And they've been updating that pretty regularly lately.
Right. So that is the one thing to me that's one of the most scary is nuclear and EMP. And a lot of times they go hand in hand. Okay, let's talk about vision and being able to see. First off, having a good pair of binoculars. You're able to observe, you're able to see things. Of course, the scope on your rifle. But having a way to be able to see, because you don't know, sometimes you have a hard time identifying what's going on. So this gives you the ability to get a better look and to identify. Second,
you know, at 600-700 yards, you can't tell what type of camouflage somebody's wearing.
Right.
You know, you can't tell if it's an American soldier. You can't tell if it's a Russian or Chinese or Iranian soldier. The camouflage patterns are all close enough that at distance, it's very, very difficult or impossible to identify what type of camouflage they're wearing.
Even if you see them.
Even if you see them. That's right. Even if they're standing out in the wide open. You know, so a good pair of binoculars is essential for being able to identify, or spotting scope, either one.
Not true.
But either one of those, binoculars or a spotting scope, for being able to identify potential threats at distance before they're in your back pocket.
Right. Now, hand me that helmet.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, buddy.
You're welcome.
Here we have night vision, PBS 14. And I mean, these things, I got this thing upside down. I had this stored separately, but a PBS 14 night vision. Night vision, this is a thing. In fact, I just took the TNVC Night Fighter 101 class. And one of the things the instructor said was, if you have night vision, you have superpowers. Nobody, you know, unless other people have them. But when you have night vision, you can see where others can't. And these are not cheap, but there are a lot of different options out there. The Psionics Aurora, I've got one of those. It's a great camera. It's not true night vision, but use a little bit of infrared light that'll really pick up things.
And I think Psionics is actually getting ready to come out with a thermal as well.
I think so. Yeah, they are.
They released it at SHOT Show this year, and it's sub $2,000.
Well,
pretty
Holosun is coming out
got
with
one as
thermal
well.
and night vision,
all on the same site.
Right.
Yep.
Better site. Here we have a Burris, and this is the BT50. It is a thermal scope. These are not cheap, but they've come down quite a bit.
Yeah.
And this is actually in partnership with Steiner. They are actually a sister company. But these are great. I did a review on the Yoder, which was a great scope. And so there's some really good stuff. Again, it's not cheap, but there are a lot of options out there. At least get something to be able to identify. And there's some things out there. Of course, do your research, because some of it's junk, but a lot of it actually is pretty decent.
Yeah, there's, you know, like we were talking about last week, I've been working on a video on a clip-on night vision that clips onto your first focal plane optic and turns your first focal plane optic into a night vision scope, or you can push a button, clip it right off, and use it as a handheld binocular.
Yeah, that's cool.
And you know, it's got a built-in infrared illuminator and a laser with it. That's adjustable. The laser is adjustable for windage and elevation, so you can shoot with a laser or use it as a designator. A lot of neat features with it, and it's like $300.
Yeah.
So you know, for somebody that's on a budget that's looking for, you know, a decent quality night vision that's going to allow them to use it as a binocular or a scope, and have the capabilities to be able to shoot out to a couple of hundred yards at night, depending on the infrared illuminator, it's a great option.
Yeah. So it gives you the advantage. It's a force multiplier for surveillance, for observation, for self-defense. I mean, there's a number of things you can use. Okay. You know, having some kind of hunting rifle. One thing that I've got laying here, and you can't see it, and I can't touch it because YouTube will shut us down. I have a Umarex Emerge. It's just one of those break action pellet rifles, and it has like a suppressor type actions where it's so quiet, but having some way to kill pests,
Mhm.
to use for small animals, for hunting, doing things like that. It's super quiet. 22 is also a good option for possibly hunting. I would kind of study some things about how to process small animals like game, like squirrels and things. Okay, ammo and magazines. I mean, guys, we kind of talked about this in one of the questions, but having a good supply of ammunition and magazines. And guys, I'm gonna tell you, we're good right now, but we could have some kind of crazy shooting and ammunition drop again. So get it while you can, while prices are down. Bug out plan. What is a good bug out plan?
The best bug out plan is not have to bug out at all.
Right.
But, if that may not always be the case. And, right now is the time that you need to start looking at putting together a bug out plan. If something happens, where am I going to go? How am I going to get there? Do I have maps because my GPS may not be working? Alternate routes. You need to have all of that mapped out on a map that you keep in your vehicle at all times. And that way, if you do have to bug out, you're not running around the house saying, where's my map? Where's my map? We got to go. It's in the car and it's ready. But all of your routes highlighted out. One thing that I like to do is even once I have all of my routes that I want to take, I still take it and type it out on a piece of paper. This road, this many miles, this road, this many miles, this road, this many miles. Kind of like you used to do with, Yahoo Maps back in the early 2000s, because the directions were terrible if you printed them out, but you could go in there and look it up and print out that showed you how many miles you needed to travel on each road. Print that out and label it with what location you're going to. And that way, if you have multiple locations, you've got multiple maps, multiple ways to get there, and store all of that in an envelope in your vehicle. And, just label it emergency bug out and put it in your dash, and it's there if you need it.
Yeah, if you have to have an evacuation from your house, you want to have a plan of where you're going, and not just throwing on a backpack and heading out to the woods, because that's a real bad situation. Let's talk about financial for a minute, because we almost forgot it. Financial, and guys, I'm big about this. Precious metals, silver, gold. This is just junk silver, and there's some gold quarter ounces in there. Just wanted to have it as an example, especially with financial. Guys, if the dollar could just collapse, in fact, we're looking at possibilities right now.
Yeah.
So having some silver and gold, some assets that you have in your hand is vital. But also, if an EMP were to hit, it's good to have some cash. I know people are looking at this going, man, how much money does he have in there? I got a bunch of ones and 100. Not really, but having cash on hand. We keep cash on hand. I've been to stores before where the power wasn't even out. They were just having problems with their machine. In fact, at Arby's the other day, if I hadn't had some cash, we wouldn't eat at Arby's. And I was wanting Arby's. But, having a little cash with you, of course, precious metals and other assets, things that you can use and trade and barter with if you need to. Especially when the dollar starts dropping in value, it's the rich. And this is one of the things that they'll go out and buy assets to protect their dollars and then resell the assets. So financial, communications, huge. Knowing where the threats are.
Yep. Well, learning how to use shortwave radio, learning how to use ham radio, learning how to use two-way radios. A two-way radio, you do not talk with it right up against your face like this. All right. Learning how to communicate on handheld devices like two-way radios or hams. How far does it need to be held away from your mouth? What type of, different earpieces that you can get, different mouthpieces that you can get for communication. There's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of great kit that's out there, but you have to do your research on it.
Right. And ham radio takes a license unless it's an emergency situation. Right. But still, even then, you won't know how to use it.
You won't have a clue without taking some of the classes on it.
Yeah, I mean, it can be very complicated, but two-way radios are very limited. Shortwave radio is great because you can receive information, and that's a big one. I highly recommend having some kind of emergency radio. Put it in a Faraday bag, and then you can use it. One with a hand crank or the solar, those are just great to have. But communication is going to be everything, because you're not going to know what's happening anywhere around you. To covert, stay hidden. Oh, I meant to bring this out. I got my plate carrier here. One of the things about magazines and ammo is you need a place to carry it. You need to be able to carry it. This one has the plates in it. It's a great self-defense option. When bullets start flying, even if you're not a combatant, you can be able to protect yourself with something like this. And this is something that, again, it's not cheap and you can do your research, but having some way to defend yourself. What's your life worth? And then covert, stay hidden. Figure out ways to camouflage what you have, especially if you have invading armies, possibly, which again is not necessarily likely, but it could happen. Or even looters and different people, is to be able to take your supplies and be able to covertly have them where they can't necessarily be found.
Well, and camouflage doesn't necessarily mean throw netting over something and camouflage it. Camouflage, a lot of cases, means making what you have look like you don't have anything.
Right.
You know, where somebody drives past your house, if you've got, you know, invading troops coming past your house and they look at it and they're like, yeah, no need in stopping there. They just keep going because they're not seeing what you actually have. If someone comes in your house, make sure when someone comes in your house that they're not seeing what you actually have just laid out in the open for them.
That's a good point. They want to come in and you got supplies piled up.
Yep. Put things, camouflage things to where it looks like it's not what it is. I mean, you could build a coffee table out of canned goods, all right, and put a cover over it, and it just looks like a coffee table.
Right.
Right. It doesn't look like it's 300 cans of food sitting there.
Right.
There's lots of ways you can camouflage things. You just have to really use your imagination to come up with unique ways to hide things that don't stand out to people.
Right. Well, guys, I think we're getting close to time. Do we have time for a question or two? Let's have it. I have to throw Sarah Mac under the bus every once in a while.
John G says, "Hi, Sarah Mac, Don,
Hey,
and
John.
Robbie. I see you have a Geiger counter on the table. How many millirem is a safe exposure?"
Do you know that? What is the millirams? Robbie went to school in the Marines,
Yeah, that's been a minute
but
ago.
it's been
Yeah, if I remember right, it's less than one, but I don't remember 100% off the top of my head. I think it's less than one.
John, I'll let you borrow my book. And you can check it out. That's something good to know. And maybe we addressed it when we did have ours. Thanks for the complicated question, John.
William Sanford asked, question, how many nuclear power plants are in South Carolina and how close are you to one?
We're close enough to where we
Within an hour.
Yeah, I think it's actually 32 miles.
Yeah.
Because I think you need to, or within 30 miles. I think you've got to be 33 miles out. There are zones. In fact, you can check them. There are zones that you can look at where the nuclear power plant is and how much area. Then we have the Savannah nuclear power plant, which produces weapons, and that's definitely a target.
As well as nuclear waste.
Right. So, yeah, South Carolina at one point was like, I think they were 90% nuclear power.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a really
We've got a couple of
system.
coal-fired power plants and a couple of gas turbine power plants in the state, but yeah, the majority of our power is nuclear here. And then we've got, Charlotte as well. They've got a couple of nuclear sites there, nuclear plants there.
So I think staying without, I believe it's within, if you're within 30 miles of that nuclear plant, if something were to go wrong, you could have a lot of problems. But outside of that, so knowing that is a good thing to know.
Yeah.
R3D asks, how long can cans last in storage anyways? 1 year, 2 years?
Indefinitely, to a point. I mean, I'm talking about 100 years.
Yeah. The big thing is keep them in a cool, dry, moisture-free environment. As long as they don't get moisture on them and start rusting, they'll last pretty much indefinitely.
Now, if they get dented or they start swelling, that's a problem.
Yep.
Really, what they say is if you open it and it smells fine, it's fine to eat.
Yep.
It's when it starts to have a little bit of a stench to it. A little bit stench. No, that's kind of oxymoron. Okay, so one of the things about canning now is that with the high pressures they use and the sanitary conditions and the can liners that are in there, really, that's one reason why I've been a big fan. And there's still videos on YouTube where people are taking World War I rations and opening them up and eating them. So, they can last. And that's been back in the day. So now the processes are even better.
Vernon Outdoors asks, question on water aspect. What is the best way to store water for long-term storage to prohibit mildew buildup? I have seen a lot of disaster storages that wind up getting orange and pink mold.
Treat your water with chlorine. There's definitely something that should be done. we have the 50-gallon blue drums that we use, and we have also rain catchment systems that we use. And so a lot of that water is stored in there. But yes, you're right. I mean, they can develop mold, especially if exposed to the sunlight, but even typically.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and bleach is my go-to for long-term water storage in drums.
right. But see, even our pool, which we treat constantly, can get, algae and must, and mold in it, or
That's
not
right.
mold, but algae in it. And so it's something that definitely needs to be monitored, because you're right. So, okay, guys, well, we are out of time. Man, that was quick. I really hate we didn't get to more questions. We love to get you guys. We love your questions because they're always good. But guys, this is not something that is pleasant, but it's something we all need to really consider, because the risk of World War III or a global conflict are growing by the day. And so we need to be prepared and need to think about these things ahead of time. And guys, you may just be getting started and you're saying, man, I can't even put my mind around all this. Main thing is to take care of your basics, your food, your water, your medical, get that taken care of. Just concentrate on that. All this other stuff, it is just part of the growing experience if you feel like the need to do that. But, don't go out and run up your bank of cards and run up your credit cards. But definitely you need to put an emphasis on being prepared. Because guys, whatever you do today, if you go out just today and you get a couple of cans of beans, that means you're more prepared than you were the day before. So just a little bit at a time and keep building up. And you'll find in no time that you have some supplies put back.
That's right.
It'll give you peace of mind. We really appreciate Robbie Wheaton for being here. Again, check out Wheaton Arms and also the Robbie Wheaton YouTube channel. And we really appreciate all of his help. And also Exotac, they give a 20% discount using Sootch 20. The link's down below in the description. They're the best fire starters in America, and they're made in Winder, Georgia. And also, we really appreciate Sarah Mack for helping us put everything together and monitoring the questions. So be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.